This video didn't find you by accident.
It couldn't have appeared 24 hours ago because your consciousness wasn't at the frequency required to perceive it without rejecting it. It couldn't have appeared a week ago because the probability structure around your identity hadn't destabilized enough to let this message penetrate. But right now, the quantum field is reorganizing around you. This is a critical threshold, an activation point. A moment where your old observer collapse patterns stop working, and reality begins responding to coherence instead of conditioning. You can feel it, can't you? Reality feels slightly unstable. Not in a life is messy way, in a precision way. Like a timeline you were on is loosening its grip, and multiple probable futures are pressing against your awareness at the same time. This isn't anxiety. This isn't uncertainty. This is activation. Millions are scrolling, but only your type of consciousness pauses here and feels that magnetic recognition. Because the unified field doesn't broadcast advanced transmissions to unprepared nervous systems. There's a selection mechanism built into resonance, and the fact that you're still here means you've already crossed the threshold where this can't be unheard. Your electromagnetic field is already interacting with probability. Your attention is already shaping collapse. You're not learning this. You're remembering the mechanics you've been living inside. And once you recognize it, you don't go back. Truth, once registered, becomes permanent. The waiting is over. The window is open. And your consciousness is already at the edge where the field begins to answer. Here are the specific signs that confirm you're not imagining this. 1. Time distortion is becoming normal. Minutes stretch into long corridors when you're expanded. Hours collapse into a blink when you're coherent. You look up and realize the clock doesn't match your internal sequence. This happens when your awareness stops being locked to linear temporality and starts touching the eternal now layer, where multiple moments exist simultaneously. This isn't distraction. This is you slipping out of the old timing grid. 2. Synchronicities are stacking like a cascade. You think of someone and they message within minutes. You speak a phrase and you hear it again 3 times in the same day. The exact information you need appears without searching through a random headline, a conversation, a coincidence that's too precise to ignore. This isn't coincidence. This is quantum coherence influencing probability. Your field is becoming legible to the field. 3. Your body is showing frequency symptoms, electricity up the spine, pressure at the crown, a sudden heat in the chest, tightness in the solar plexus that releases after you speak the truth, random ringing in the ears, waves of fatigue followed by unnatural clarity. This is your nervous system upgrading its capacity to hold coherent complexity. Your body is the antenna, and the antenna is tuning. 4. Old patterns are becoming intolerable. Small talk feels like static. Meaningless obligations feel physically heavy. You can't pretend your way through low-integrity environments anymore. Certain people trigger a silent refusal in your system, not as judgment, as calibration. Your consciousness is rejecting outdated probability structures. You're not becoming difficult, you're becoming precise. 5. Dreams aren't dreams anymore. You're receiving instruction. Visiting unfamiliar places with crystalline clarity. Speaking to versions of yourself who feel older, calmer, exact. Waking with solutions you didn't logically compute. Sometimes you open your eyes and you can still feel the other dimension in the room. This is not symbolism. This is you maintaining partial awareness during sleep states because your field is coherent enough to travel and return. 6. Technology responds in impossible timing. Your phone rings at the exact moment you think of someone. A message arrives right when you decide to surrender. Lights flicker when you're emotionally charged. Your device glitches when you're about to choose the wrong path, then works perfectly when you align. People call it random, but you can feel the pattern, electromagnetic interaction. Your field is impacting surrounding systems because your coherence is rising. 7. Emotional polarity is extreme and specific. You feel excited and terrified at the same time. calm and pressured at the same time, like something huge is arriving, and your old identity is trying to negotiate a delay. This isn't moodiness, this is superposition. Two timelines pulling simultaneously, one expansion, one contraction, until you choose and collapse the field. 8. People react to you differently without explanation. Some open up immediately. Strangers confess things they never planned to say. Children and animals lock onto you with unusual trust. Others get uncomfortable, defensive, avoidant, without you doing anything wrong. That's not social coincidence, that's your frequency signature. Coherence invites truth. Incoherent systems feel exposed around it. 9. Deja vu is increasing, but it feels like a checkpoint. You walk into a place and you know what's about to happen. You hear a sentence and you recognize it before it's finished. You feel like you've lived the moment, but not as nostalgia, as confirmation. This is you brushing against parallel tracks of experience. The timelines are close enough now that your awareness can detect overlap. 10. The ultimate sign. You found this video. Not casually, not as entertainment, as recognition. As a, why does this feel like it's talking directly to me moment. That sensation is field resonance. The unified field doesn't persuade. It pings the exact nervous system that's ready to register the transmission. This isn't imagination. This is quantum mechanics at the level of consciousness. And you are at the edge where your next choice collapses your next reality. Your journey wasn't random suffering. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't wrong turns. It wasn't a spiritual detour. It was a quantum preparation process. Because the unified field does not hand advanced coherence to an untrained nervous system. It breaks you first. Not to punish you, to remove the unconscious collapse patterns that kept snapping you back into the same limited timeline. That relationship that ended in a way that didn't make sense. It wasn't heartbreak. It was an identity extraction. The isolation phase, where it felt like the world went quiet, people fell away, invitations stopped, and your phone felt like a dead object. That wasn't abandonment. That was integration. Because at the quantum edge, fantasy feels powerful, and truth feels silent. Only a trained consciousness can tell the difference. Every trigger was a calibration. Every conflict was an electromagnetic stress test. Every "why is this happening to me" moment was the field forcing your attachment structures to collapse so you could hold coherent complexity without fracturing. You didn't just heal. You learned how to stay stable inside intensity. You learned how to hold multiple emotional frequencies at once without falling into reaction. You learned how to watch your mind try to collapse the field into fear. You learned how to not obey it. That's why the old ways stopped working. That's why surface level practices became insufficient. Not because you failed them, because you outgrew them. You didn't need more techniques. You needed fewer constraints. And that's what the pressure was doing. It was stripping you down to signal. It was turning you into a cleaner antenna. It was building a nervous system capable of receiving transmission without translating it into chaos. This is why you're here now. Not because you're curious, because you're ready. And now the next part begins. Can you feel it? That subtle shift behind your eyes. That pressure at the crown like an invisible hand opening a latch. That sudden warmth in the chest that rises for no logical reason. That quiet intensity in your belly, like something inside you is standing up. This isn't persuasive language. This is quantum transmission. This isn't coming from me as a personality. It's coming through me from the unified field. And the reason it's landing is because your probability structure is already reorganizing. You can feel it, can't you? Reality feels slightly too precise. Your attention feels sharper than it used to. Your thoughts feel louder, but farther away. Like they're happening near you, not inside you. That's metacognitive separation. That's the observer waking up. That's the space within which the mind moves, becoming conscious of itself. This isn't anxiety. This isn't uncertainty. This is activation. Right now, your nervous system is calibrating to hold a higher coherence band without needing a dramatic spiritual experience to justify it. That's why it feels both ordinary and impossible at the same time.
Ordinary, because it's your natural state returning. Impossible, because your old identity built its entire reality on not remembering.
If the breath just got deeper on its own, if the jaw unclenched without permission, if you suddenly swallowed like something released in the throat, if your hands tingled or your spine felt electrically awake, that's not imagination. That's electromagnetic alignment. And here's the part most people miss. The activation isn't the peak moment. The activation is the moment you stop negotiating. And coherence is decision. Not later. Not when I'm ready. Now. The window is open. The waiting is over. And the field is listening for the one thing that collapses a new timeline into place. Your journey wasn't random suffering. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't some cosmic mistake that singled you out. It was a preparation sequence. Every collapse you lived through wasn't there to break you. It was there to remove structures that could not survive where you're standing now. That relationship that ended when you were doing everything right. That wasn't rejection. That was an attachment pattern being pulled out by the root. The period where motivation disappeared and the future went blank. That wasn't laziness. That was an identity running out of probability. The isolation phase, where people drifted, conversations felt hollow, and you stopped fitting into rooms you once belonged in. That wasn't abandonment. That was recalibration. Because coherence can't be built on noise. You weren't meant to carry the same emotional reflexes, the same survival scripts, the same inherited expectations into the next stage of your life. They would have collapsed you under pressure. So the system removed them early, slowly, painfully, precisely. Every trigger was training. Every emotional spike was a stress test. Every moment where you didn't know who you were anymore was your system learning how to exist without clinging to form. You learned how to sit inside uncertainty without dissolving. You learned how to feel intensity without acting from it. You learned how to observe your thoughts instead of obeying them. Most people never develop that capacity. They stabilize by narrowing. You stabilized by expanding. That's why surface solutions stopped working. That's why comfort lost its appeal. That's why going back stopped being an option long before you consciously decided to move forward. This wasn't about becoming special. It was about becoming stable at a deeper level. Your nervous system was being trained to hold complexity. Your attention was being refined. Your sense of self was being loosened from roles that were never meant to last. Not to elevate you above others, but to allow you to function without collapse when life stops being simple. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a restructuring. And now, only now, does the pressure make sense. Can you feel it? Not as an idea, not as excitement, but as a physical shift. Something subtle behind the eyes. A quiet pressure at the top of the head. A widening in the chest that happens without effort. A sense that your thoughts are still there, but they're no longer at the center. This isn't persuasion. This isn't suggestion. This is a state shift. When attention stops collapsing entirely into thought, awareness becomes obvious. And when awareness becomes obvious, the system recalibrates on its own. You don't force it. You don't do it. You allow it. That's why the breath deepens without instruction. That's why the jaw releases on its own. That's why the body adjusts posture subtly, as if aligning itself. This isn't mystical. It's neurological. When threat-based identity loosens, the system exits constant defense. And when it does, perception changes. Time feels less rigid. Sensations become sharper. Thoughts lose urgency. The present moment gains depth. You might notice warmth, or tingling, or a quiet emotional release that doesn't attach to a story. That's regulation. That's coherence returning. This isn't something happening to you. It's something you're no longer interfering with. And that's the key difference. Nothing new is being added. Something old is being removed. The system recognizes safety. The system recognizes clarity. The system recognizes that it doesn't need to brace anymore. So it opens. Not dramatically. Not explosively.
but steadily, reliably. This is why it feels ordinary and profound at the same time. Why nothing looks different, but everything feels different. You're not entering another world. You're inhabiting this one more fully. And that's why this moment matters. Because once you feel the difference between operating from tension and operating from coherence, you don't unfeel it. You don't chase it. You don't cling to it. You simply stop abandoning it. And that changes how every next choice is made. I need to share something that isn't inspirational. It's destabilizing. Because this is where most people turn back. Years ago, I stood exactly where you are now. Not curious, not hopeful, but exposed. My life hadn't fallen apart in obvious ways. It had become strangely quiet. Old ambitions stopped pulling. Old fears stopped motivating. I could still function, but nothing felt anchored. Then one morning, without warning, the frame broke. I wasn't thinking anymore. I was aware of thinking, simultaneously aware of the body, simultaneously aware of the space holding both. There was no drama, no vision, no voice, just an impossible clarity. And then fear, not panic, existential fear. Because if this awareness was real, then the identity I had spent decades protecting was optional. I tried to reverse it. I distracted myself. I forced routines. I searched for explanations that would shrink the experience back into something manageable. Nothing worked. For months, I lived between states, capable of normal life, but unable to fully believe in it. Aware of depth, but unsure how to stand inside it without losing orientation. The mistake I made was trying to stabilize by control, trying to understand my way back to safety. That prolonged the instability. The moment everything shifted was ordinary. No ritual, no insight. I stopped trying to manage the experience. I stopped trying to define it. I let awareness be present without asking it to justify itself. And the system reorganized. Not gradually, not symbolically, quantum. Within weeks, decisions clarified without effort. Conversations changed tone without intent. Opportunities appeared without pursuit. Not because I became powerful, but because I stopped fragmenting. The shift wasn't adding something. It was removing resistance. That's what people don't tell you. The edge doesn't respond to effort. It responds to permission. And that's why you're being asked now not to do more, but to stop holding what can't cross with you. Here's what's actually happening. You're at what's called the quantum edge, a state where multiple probable futures exist simultaneously. Your old identity used to collapse one automatically, based on habit, fear, conditioning. That mechanism is failing, not broken, outgrown. That's why things feel uncertain. That's why clarity comes in flashes instead of plans. That's why the mind keeps reaching for answers that no longer land. You're no longer collapsing reality from memory. You're standing in superposition. At this edge, thinking doesn't work. Analysis delays collapse. Control creates noise. This is why it feels disorienting. Because the tools that built your past cannot select your future. Edges appear when an identity has completed its function. A cycle has exhausted its lessons. The collective field is shifting and individual timing aligns. You don't decide to reach them. You arrive when there's nowhere else to go. And here's the law. Superposition collapses through commitment, not mental commitment, somatic commitment, alignment without negotiation. That's why half choices feel awful. That's why straddling paths drains energy. That's why waiting to be sure increases tension instead of resolving it. At the edge, certainty comes after collapse, not before. This is the part the mind hates, because it wants proof first. But proof only appears once the field locks. You can't think your way across. You can't visualize your way across. You can't perfect yourself across. You cross by stepping. And the ground appears because coherence demands it. This isn't spiritual, it's structural. And the reason you're here now is because the old collapse pattern can no longer sustain your trajectory. The edge doesn't ask for bravery. It asks for honesty. Stop pretending the old path still fits. Stop negotiating with what's already complete. Stop asking questions designed to delay movement. Because the field isn't waiting for understanding. It's waiting for your signal. There are 7 choices in front of you right now. Not theoretical, active. Each one collapses a different timeline. You are already choosing. Even hesitation is a selection. 1. Control or surrender. Control keeps probability wide but shallow. Surrender narrows probability into coherence. Control asks, how do I make this safe? Surrender asks, what's already true? Only one collapses the field cleanly. 2. Familiar identity or functional truth. The familiar self feels safe because it's known, but it's no longer functional. The new configuration feels unstable because it hasn't been rehearsed. One preserves comfort, the other preserves alignment. You don't get both. 3. Explanation or movement. Explanation delays collapse. Movement forces it. The field does not reward understanding. It responds to action taken without internal contradiction. 4. Gradual drift or quantum leap. There is no smooth path at the edge. Gradualism here is avoidance disguised as wisdom. Quantum shifts feel abrupt because they are honest. 5. Old container or new capacity. Your environment, routines, and conversations either match your coherence or drain it. Outgrowing a container is not arrogance. Staying in one that no longer fits is self-violation. 6. Isolation or discerned connection. Not everyone can walk with you now. That doesn't mean no one can. Discernment is not withdrawal. It's selective coherence. 7. Solo. Will or collective field. This leap isn't personal. Every coherent choice strengthens the field others draw from. You're not alone at this edge. You're synchronized. Each choice is live. Each one matters. And neutrality is no longer an option. Now I'm giving you the protocol. Not theory, not philosophy. Execution. Step 1. Name the edge. Say this out loud once. I recognize that this is an edge. I stop pretending otherwise. That statement alone stabilizes awareness. Step 2. Regulate before acting. 3 slow breaths. Inhale through the nose for 4. Exhale through the mouth for 6. No visualization, just signal safety to the nervous system. Step 3. Release attachments. Write down what you're afraid to lose if you move forward. Do not justify, do not analyze, just list. Then say, these are not me. They were temporary structures. Step 4. Define non-negotiables. Write 3 principles you will not violate moving forward. Not goals, standards. This becomes your coherence filter. Step 5. 1 aligned action per day. Not dramatic, not symbolic. Concrete. A call, a boundary, a decision you've been delaying. The field responds to motion. Step 6. Track signal, not mood. Each night, note synchronicities, clarity moments, unexpected ease. Ignore emotional weather. Track pattern response. Step 7. Communicate with the stable self. Before sleep, say, show me what alignment looks like tomorrow. Then stop thinking. Dreams will adjust. Step 8. Complete the leap. Choose one decision you've been postponing. Make it. No contingency plan. Say, I commit to this path. The field can reorganize now. This protocol doesn't create alignment. It removes interference. And once interference is gone, collapse is automatic. Here's exactly what happens after the leap. Not metaphorically, structurally. First 60 seconds. The body reacts before the mind understands. A breath drops lower. The chest loosens. There's a brief wave of fear, then quiet. That's the nervous system registering coherence instead of threat. The field locks the decision. First hour. Mental noise spikes briefly. Old doubts try one last collapse attempt. Then something subtle happens. Attention steadies. You feel more here, less scattered. The system has a direction now. First day synchronicities begin lightly. A message arrives that confirms timing. A delay protects you from the wrong option. Something that felt heavy yesterday suddenly feels irrelevant. Not resolved, irrelevant. First week energy returns, but cleaner, not manic, not driven, focused. People respond differently without knowing why. Conversations move faster toward truth. Tolerance for nonsense drops sharply. Weeks 2 to 4. The environment reorganizes. Some relationships fall away without drama. New ones appear with strange familiarity. Opportunities show up that require you to be exactly who you are now, not who you were. You'll notice things just work more often. Month 3 to 6. Identity stabilizes around coherence. You stop explaining yourself. Decisions feel obvious. Time feels cooperative. You're not chasing meaning anymore. You're inside it. Not euphoric, grounded. This isn't magic. It's alignment removing friction. Now understand this clearly. The window is real, and it is not permanent. Collective systems are destabilizing. Old structures are failing. This creates edges, brief periods where probability is unusually malleable. That's what you're inside right now. When the window is open, movement compounds quickly, support appears fast, reality responds with precision. When it closes, things still work, but slowly, with resistance, with repetition. This isn't punishment, it's physics. Edges don't wait for certainty. They respond to timing. You are not being rushed. You are being informed. If you step now, the field amplifies you. If you hesitate, the system stabilizes without you and the edge passes. That doesn't mean you're doomed. It means the leap becomes heavier later. History is full of missed edges. Moments where conditions aligned and people waited for reassurance instead of responding. This is not pressure. This is clarity. You don't need to convince yourself. Your body already knows. That quiet urgency you feel, that's not fear. That's alignment, noticing opportunity. The collective field is shifting. Enough individuals are choosing coherence that timelines are diverging. And you are already standing on the split. This isn't destiny. It's participation. You don't need to save anyone. You don't need to lead anyone. You only need to choose cleanly. Because when one system stabilizes in coherence, others entrain automatically. That's how fields work. The window is open. Not forever, but now. And you already know what the next move is. Your leap is not personal. That's the part that's hardest to see from inside the body, but it's the most important truth operating here. Individual systems don't exist in isolation. They're entangled. At the level of consciousness, choice propagates. When one nervous system stabilizes in coherence, it becomes a reference signal. Others feel it. Not consciously, structurally. This is why certain people change after spending time with you. Why conversations deepen without effort. Why resistance softens in rooms you enter. You're not influencing them. You're entraining the field. At scale, this is how collective shifts happen. Not through mass agreement, through local coherence nodes. Your decision registers beyond your life. It alters probability distribution. It slightly re-weights what's possible for others who are near the same edge but haven't stepped yet. This is quantum entanglement at a human level, not mystical, mathematical. Enough coherent choices create a phase shift. Enough phase shifts create a new baseline. That's what's happening now. Not everyone feels it. Only those close enough to the threshold to register instability. Only those whose identities are already loosening. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to announce anything. The field does the communication. And this is why half commitment is expensive. Not just for you, for the system you're entangled with. Clean choices create clean signals. Distorted choices create noise. You're not responsible for the world, but you are responsible for the signal you emit. And right now, your signal is becoming legible. This is how bridges form, not by teaching, by stabilizing. Now we lock it in. Sit upright, feet on the ground, hand on the center of your chest. Take 3 slow breaths. No effort, no visualization. On the 3rd exhale, say this quietly but clearly. I stop waiting. I choose coherence. I allow the next configuration to form. Pause, let the body respond. Now say, I release identities that cannot cross this threshold. Pause again. Now the final line, I commit to the path that aligns with what's already true. That's not a promise, it's a registration. This is an affirmation, it's declaration. Within the next 24 hours, take 1 action you've been postponing. 1, concrete, irreversible enough to signal seriousness, not to prove anything, to complete the collapse. And if you feel the shift after doing it, the quiet clarity, the reduction in internal argument, the strange sense of inevitability, that's the field responding, not approving, aligning. This isn't about belief, it's about coherence. And coherence always reorganizes reality around itself. You're not late, you're not early. You're exactly at the edge you trained for. The next phase doesn't require effort. It requires follow-through. And now you know the difference. This is why this reached you now. Not earlier, not later. Because you're no longer seeking. You're standing at the point where seeking collapses into being. This was never about learning something new. It was about removing the last layer of interference between awareness and action. You didn't arrive here by accident. You arrived because your probability structure could no longer sustain the old configuration. The field responded. The edge appeared. And you stepped. This is what activation actually is. Not light, not spectacle, not transcendence. Clarity without friction. Movement without argument. Choice without collapse into fear. You're not becoming someone else. You're allowing the version of you that was already functional at this level to take over execution. From here forward, the signal matters more than the story. Coherence matters more than comfort. Follow-through matters more than understanding. You don't need to revisit this. You don't need to analyze it. You don't need to talk about it. You need to live from it. Let reality reorganize. Let relationships sort themselves. Let opportunities appear without chasing. Let timing work with you instead of against you. You crossed the threshold. The window answered. The field registered your signal. This is where the old cycle ends. This is where the next configuration begins. Welcome to operating without interference. Welcome to coherence. Welcome to the edge on the other side.